So, just as a summary of everything we covered in Chapter 1, really and truly read Chapter 1. Of course, you should always do that, but particularly because Chapter 1 more or less is a roadmap to the rest of the course. We talked about virtualization software, we talked about hypervisors, the types of hypervisors, um, with the hardware virtualization that gets built right into our processors with things like virtualization extensions, and there are other things that allow the physical machine to virtualize a single physical platform to multiple virtual platforms. Things like memory handling, CPU access, all of it. Virtualization software falls into a couple of categories. Workstation virtualization, which is what you can practice um, at home with your own computer with VMware Fusion or Hyper-V or VirtualBox or VMware Workstation or even VMware Player if you've got an appliance that you know you need to use, but you don't need to change all that often. There's also uh, data center virtualization, say if you're virtualizing servers or virtual desktop infrastructure, which sort of would live more or less in the data center, but provide the equivalent of workstation virtualization for end users. Things like Windows terminal services will do this, or cloud-based virtualization. Which in the case of cloud-based virtualization, again, you've got a data center running in the back end, but it could be a cloud virtualized data center or a cloud data center virtualizing virtual desktop infrastructure. Technically speaking, from a certain point of view, even workstation virtualization, if it's being, depending on how it's being done, almost counts as virtual desktop infrastructure if you're doing it at scale. Um, of course, our workstation virtualization is supporting desktop OSs. Our data center virtualization reduces server sprawl by allowing us to concentrate a number of virtual machines into a single physical platform. Application virtualization allows us to run different applications on the same computer. Say, for example, if you have two different versions of um, a software suite that you need to, for whatever reason, use both. You can create an appliance or a virtual machine or basically an application container for just the application itself. We do these things with things. You might also hear this called containerization. If you've heard of references to a program called Docker, it kind of works that way. Of course, I talked about VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. The cloud represents services that are available across the internet, either to the public or private. You can build your own. That's what we call a private cloud. Or you can buy one from a cloud service provider that would be public. Or you can hybridize. You build your own and then roll over into the cloud if you have a burst of access. That's what we would call hybridization. Um, your virtualization software has user consoles and admin consoles. Essentially, a program like um, a VMware Workstation is kind of both. Um, our hypervisors do use a lot of interesting, sophisticated technology to manage host memory, things like shadow page tables and things. So what we're trying to do is prevent them from contending from the same physical memory. Give them chunks of virtual memory, even whether on the hard drive or whatnot. Actually, when you look at any running VM, say for example, if you've got VMware Workstation, and you fire it up and you look into the directory that VM is running from, you'll notice a file that is essentially its virtual memory, what it thinks of as its RAM. Of course, it's a file on the hard drive, so it's essentially treating the hard drive as its RAM, and then swapping into RAM for the really fast things. Um, of course, this also gives us virtual disks. There's a virtual disk, virtual memory, even virtual swap space. Um, we can do things like saving a VM state with cloning or snapshotting. We can manipulate the way it uses the networks, add extra tools. Say, for example, with a VMware Workstation or ESXi or vCenter, unless you have a good reason to not do it, say it might be a security risk, it's a really good idea to install VMware tools on all of them to allow you to do things like dragging and dropping, sharing things, etc. Um, and VMware Workstation will allow you to run and manage VMs. VMware vSphere is our data center virtualization product, basically the command center for a number of ESXi hosts. You can actually do a lot of the management in the ESXi host itself, or you can set up vSphere. Actually, technically, no, now that I think about it, vSphere and ESXi are more or less the same thing. You can either manage the ESXi hosts individually, run the VMs on them, or set up vCenter and run a whole bunch of ESXi hosts together from the same console. And Hyper-V is Microsoft's product. They started shipping it with Windows Server 2008. So it's been in 2008 R2, 2012, 2012 R2, 2016, 2019. Before that, they called it Virtual PC. But honestly, you shouldn't be using a Windows version that old anyway. This has been my video series on Chapter 1. Thanks for watching.